All right, good morning, everybody. Event Trader here. Going to be joined by Carmine Atteo, our Special Situations Analyst. Carmine, are you there?
Yeah, Gavin, how you doing today?
Doing good. How was your fourth?
Oh, excellent.
That's good. That's good. Anything exciting?
I just had a barbecue with a few friends and lit up the skies for a little while with the fireworks and everything. It was fun times.
Nice. Got to get those fireworks in before the tariffs start
Yeah, I know
driving up all
exactly. I
those
had to shoot
prices, right?
at least about $100 I shot off into the sky. So
Nice. Very nice. So, with the tariffs firmly in discussion here, let's just kind of do a recap. There was a little bit of news out over the weekend, and probably figure it's best to start off going there, just so we could get everybody up to speed on where we stand. But there was a lot of talk about the USTR reviewing tariffs for to throw on some European companies due to some subsidiaries that have been going to Airbus out of the government. So, you want to provide us a little bit of insight into that $4 billion in EU tariffs that were threatened?
yeah. So this was last week, but I just want to get everybody up to speed since we last talked. The USTR added $4 billion in EU tariffs to an existing review related to the Airbus subsidies. Now, these tariffs did not go into effect yet, but essentially what the USTR did was it added $4 billion in products to the existing review that they have ongoing. So this is pending, a little different than the other tariffs that the Trump administration has put on, because this is pending a WTO ruling on illegal aircraft subsidies to Airbus. So I think it's important to put some context into this, because on November 16th of 2018, the WTO said the compliance panel did not expect to complete its work by the end of this year. So this ruling more than likely will not come into effect until early next year at the earliest. So, but if the ruling comes down in favor of the Trump administration, they will likely put these tariffs into place. It'll be a total of $21 billion in EU tariffs. And the list includes helicopters, aircraft, motorcycles, meat products, dairy products, Italian cheeses, scotch, and other dairy products as well, and copper alloys. So some stock plays to watch if this ruling comes down quicker than expected. I know it's probably won't be until next year, but just to keep everybody on the radar, it would be FCX for copper, DF and SAFM for the dairy products, and UTX, HRL, SPR for the aircraft, HOG for motorcycles, obviously. So to keep those plays on the radar, especially, and also Boeing and Airbus as well, because this whole thing is pretty much tied to them.
Yeah, and we'll be posting all these tickers to the site shortly after I get off with Carmine here. And Boeing, of course, also had the hot news too, where there was an order from a Saudi Arabian company that canceled out 50 orders of the 737 Maxes and are now going to be ordered through Airbus. So that's likely to help heat up this conversation a little bit more too, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll be interested to see how President Trump responds to that, because he's, been pretty upbeat upon what the Saudis are contributing to the economy as far as buying defense goods and things
Exactly.
like that. So I would interested to see his reaction to this, if that changes his view on the Saudis in any way.
Yeah, yeah, it is funny because with it being a Saudi uh, airplane company, one has to wonder, is there any sort of kind of backdrop on this at all? Just because you're kind of looking around at Europe and Iran talking about the nuclear deal, and one has to wonder if there's some sort of political backdrop to this decision too. So I found it pretty interesting news over the
Yeah, it's a very
weekend,
good point.
and another backdrop for this Boeing Airbus fight that's going on, and the potential for the tariffs that could be in play with it as well. Now,
Absolutely.
on the China front, let's take a look at that before we move any further. Over the weekend, or on Friday, there was a number of stories out where China was saying that their purchase of the agribusiness that was so prevalent in the news headlines following the G20 meeting could be contingent on how the U.S. treats Huawei. We were talking last week about how that Huawei review was underway, and we could potentially be getting an update soon. Do you know where we stand with that at all yet?
Yeah, we're still waiting. My guess is that they're still working it out. There was quite a few, not quite a few, but maybe 3 or 4 senators that were Republican senators that were very concerned about President Trump withdrawing any of the restrictions against Huawei. So I would assume that they're talking to them to try to placate any concerns that they have, because the last thing the administration wants is some type of Senate revolt on the restrictions that they rescind. So I would guess that they're talking to Marco Rubio and Rick Scott of Florida, who are very concerned about the removal of some of these restrictions against Huawei. And also, I would guess that they're speaking with the Commerce Department and seeing exactly what products do not impact the national security as much, so they can put those out on a list. I would still think we should expect some more information this week to come on that. I think with the holiday too, it kind of delayed things.
Yeah, that'll push back. So your best case for a time frame then would be what, towards the end of this week, you think?
Yeah, towards the end of this week. President Trump, the White House releases a daily schedule for President Trump every day. They only do it for one day out, so they don't do it for like 3 or 4 days out. So today's schedule, there's nothing on it as far as a meeting with the Commerce Department on this issue. I would have guessed that once this is decided, President Trump will want to announce it himself. So there's nothing on the schedule today to that effect, and I'll be checking it every day, and we'll definitely keep everybody updated as to when. If something with the Commerce Department and Huawei appears on its schedule, then we'll be able to put that out there and keep everybody updated.
All right. Then on top of that, we saw the Department of Commerce announce that it's going to collect duties of up to about 456% on steel products from Vietnam. So we could obviously see Vietnam's getting really dragged into the crosshairs here. Was there any additional information on that at all?
No, not really. That's basically it. And this is a part of the 232 tariff authority that they already got approved through the Commerce Department. So remember that we had the steel tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and the EU, and with the USTR trade agreement, they dropped them off of Canada and Mexico. So they basically only are on the EU and China right now. And in addition to now, we now have the steel tariffs on Vietnam. The Vietnam rate is quite a bit more than the other rates are, but I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I'm not sure how much steel product is coming out of Vietnam, but this might be a little bit shot across the bow towards Vietnam, as the Trump administration definitely sees the supply shifts into that country.
Yeah, it feels like the administration's just trying to choke off anywhere where labor is running to on the supply chain and try to drive them back to the U.S. if they're going to continue to do this. Because we've talked a lot about Vietnam being the big beneficiary of the issues going on with China, but now it's just kind of looking like a little bit of whack-a-mole where any country that pops up with the supply chain, the administration's going to go after. That's my take on it. So curious to see how this falls out, because at some point they're going to run out of moles to whack, right?
Yeah.
So, over the weekend, Carmine, Joe Biden was in the news, obviously one of the front runners for the Democratic ticket, and he was talking a little bit about the trade war and corporate taxes. You want to tell us what was going on there?
Yeah, so he gave an interview to CNN on Friday night, and it was a quite in-depth interview. I posted a transcript on my weekend reading summary on it. For our purposes, he talked about a couple of different items of note. That for the first thing he said, it was about the China trade war, and he said it doesn't make any sense, and that it's, quote, ludicrous to think that the U.S. is benefiting from this. Those are his words. And so like I said, let me also finish out what he said. He also said that he would raise the corporate tax rate to 28% from 21%. Now, the corporate tax rate was 35% before the Tax Cuts and Job Acts brought it down to 21%. So he's kind of basically putting it in the middle between where it was and where it is now. and he would raise the corporate tax rate to 39%, which is where it was, or 39.5, or the top tax rate rather, to 39.5%, which is where it was before the Tax Cut and Jobs Act came into effect. So a couple of things on that. I said a few weeks ago on this show that the issues that the markets are going to be focusing on going into the election are these types of issues, not Medicare for all or wiping out student debt or anything along those lines, because that's going to require a lot more support in Congress than that they're going to have pretty much. So these things can be done. As you know, the tariffs can be removed by a stroke of a pen. So if Joe Biden gets elected and he decides to remove all the tariffs, he can do that without any congressional approval, just like President Trump can put it on without any congressional approval. So those are the issues that are going to be front and center, I think, as we head into the election, especially if Joe Biden is the nominee. Now, according to the odds makers, right now there's about a 23% chance that Joe Biden's the nominee. Therethere's about a 45% chance that President Trump is reelected. There's a 70% chance that the Senate stays Republican, and there's about a 65% chance that the House stays Democratic. So this is put those odds out there for anyone that's interested in that. The tax rates can be changed with 51 votes in the Senate. So Joe Biden, if he wants to do that, would need a Democratic House in theory and a Republican or a Democratic Senate as well in order to change those rates, because most of the Republicans now in the Senate voted for the tax bill, so it's unlikely that they'll vote to overturn it. So this is something to keep an eye on. But again, the key is that these measures as far as tax reform can be done with 51 votes, and the China trade stuff can be done just out of executive order out of the White House. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
All right. Next up, let's talk about this. President Trump is preparing an executive order on drug prices that will declare a favored nations clause. You want to explain that a little to us?
Yeah, so this is something that's been talked about for quite a while that's never been put into place yet. There's no timing on this yet. He just basically mentioned that it's coming up. So I would expect this over the next few weeks maybe. What this basically means is that the Medicare rate on selective drugs will be indexed to a rate of international prices. So this is negative for the drug makers because the prices that they get would theoretically be lower than what Medicare is paying now for these types of drugs. So any the biotech names, IVB, like I'm not sophisticated enough to know exactly what some of these biotechs are doing in which field, but I like the ETF, the IVB, as far as a play on that.
All right. Next up, building off of that, we got a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals hearing this week on the constitutionality of the ACA, which is, of course, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. A decision's expected later this year, and you figure whichever way this decision goes, it's probably going to be appealed by the Supreme Court. But is there anything major at play that could change the landscape for the ACA here?
Yes, well, the decision will likely get appealed no matter which way it goes, but the hearings are going to start on Tuesday in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, that is one of the most conservative courts in the country. It's in Lafayette, Louisiana. So the case, based on that, could go in the favor of the administration. Now, if that happens, the hospital stocks will likely get hit on that because Obamacare benefited the hospital stocks because more people were insured. So any threat to the existing Obamacare law would be a negative for those hospital stocks such as THC, HCA, UHS, CYH, etc. So, but again, any decline in those stocks could be bought because this whatever ruling, if let's say the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals rules in favor of the administration and declares Obamacare unconstitutional, there's 20 states that are ready to appeal that to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is a little different now than what it was before, but the key is that John Roberts is still there, who voted in favor of keeping Obamacare in place the last time we went through this. So it's unlikely that he'll change his mind, but that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But the key is to watch those hospital stocks on any commentary that comes out of this hearing. The ruling should be within another month or two, but we will see some reports this week about what the judges on the appeals court said, and more than likely what the judges are going to say is taking a negative view toward the Affordable Care Act. So that might be negative for these hospital stocks because of the political makeup of this court. More than likely they're going to be the opinions that come out of the court will be negative toward the Affordable Care Act.
All right. And then we got a few hearings. The big one, of course, is PAL. I'll be getting into that pretty deep with Brett later on today, and probably
I figured I'd save that for you.
But a few others, too. There's a hearing on marijuana laws in America. Is there anything of note coming from that hearing that could impact the marijuana names?
Yeah, I wanted
to... on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, it's a House hearing. So, the House is controlled by the Democrats. So there could be some type of proposals that come out of this hearing for some new laws favorable to marijuana legislation. But more than likely, any bill that gets through any committee in the House will be dead on arrival in the Senate. So, again, this is just something to keep an eye on, and just keep in the back of your mind if you're bullish on these stocks that the legislation is unlikely to become law right now, and with the current makeup of the Congress. But it could provide some boosted, like some of the names like Tilray or CGC in the near term, and when people see that the headlines are crossing that they have some proposed new legislation. But again, it's important to note that there's a lot of steps to the process, and not to understand that that this particular Congress is unlikely to provide any national marijuana legislation, at least in the near term.
All right, and then in the Senate, of course, Powell will be there the day after on Thursday. And then there's a hearing on global natural gas markets. Anything that we need to know there?
Yeah, so they're going to talk about natural gas markets and the role of liquefying natural gas. So, keep the natural gas stocks on the radar here. I'm not exactly sure who the witnesses are. Unfortunately, they don't put them out till the day of the hearing. So, but if there's any executives from any companies that will be of note there, I assume, there's going to be somebody testifying, so you're not going to just be talking amongst themselves. So, it's kind of tough right now to say who would be impacted right now, but keep the natural gas stocks on the radar.
All right, good stuff. So, Carmine, for the China trade wars, then the Huawei is the big item this week. Anything else of note? I know that there's been talks of phone conversations coming up, but nothing set on the calendar at all or anything, right?
No, nothing yet. There was a South China Morning Post story that little progress has been made so far, but I just want to point out that the talks just restarted a couple of days ago, so it's not unreasonable to believe that little progress has been made in a couple of days on these big issues. So there's going to be a lot of reports about like that over the next this came from China's media, so I'm not dismissing it, but I'm just saying that, put it in context, the talks just started a couple of days ago, and it's unlikely that there's going to be any breakthrough in a couple of days. If there were, we would have had the issue solved by now. So
yeah, no, it seems like Huawei's the bottleneck till we get things
right
going,
exactly.
All right, great. Well, Carmine, I think that does it for us over here. Anything else to add before we let you go?
Well, I wanted to on Huawei. I wanted to give those stocks, as far as those stock picks that sell their products into Huawei, that will keep on the radar for these for this upcoming decision from the Commerce Department on that. So that's ACIA, FNSR, Light, and Qualcomm. Keep those on the radar ahead of any decisions on that. They will most likely put out a list of products that they deem that are not national security risks that will be allowed to be able to sold to Huawei. So if any of those products are manufactured by any one of those companies or all of them, it'll be positive for those stocks.
All right, fantastic. Well, Carmine, again, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you over the course of the week if anything pops up, and certainly ahead before next week, too.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks for having me on.
All right, no problem. Talk to you soon.
Bye.